All right, good morning. I think we're going to go ahead and get started here. I got to say, looking up on the screen, it looks like ESU1 has a big old watch party going on, and this is probably going to be every bit as exciting as a Super Bowl watch party, I think. And you guys don't look like you have very many snacks there, though. Um, just for kicks and giggles, if somebody from ESU1 would type in how many people are up there and see if anybody else has any more, a bigger watch party for us this morning. I'm sure we'll have plenty of excitement as we go through the material today. We've got a lot of different things. We're going to cover budgets and all the legislative changes that occurred, exclusions, pretty much all the fun stuff, everything you guys need to know. I know it's not quite Christmas, but it is the second best time of the year, budget season. That's maybe a bad joke there, but we will cover what you guys need to know. Jeff Schreier from the auditor's office is here with us, and he'll kick things off here in just a second as far as covering material. And then Teresa Harburg, Stephanie DeGroat, Michelle Cartwright, and myself will all go through additional material today. If you have questions as we go along, just feel free to type those into the chat and we'll try and monitor that and answer those as we go along. If we miss any, we'll also provide an opportunity at the end to just kind of allow for questions to come in and do a Q&A in case we didn't cover something that people have questions on. So that's kind of the housekeeping stuff to get us started. I will tell for those people who are expecting me to tell a joke, I got to say, my boss texted me the other day and said he's getting ready for a presentation and asked me if I had any good jokes. I texted him back and said, sorry, I can't right now, I'm working. He replied back and said, that's hilarious. He said, send me another one. So there's my joke for the day. I guess we'll get it out of the way early. That way we can move on with the good material. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, and I will be back up at the end to wrap things up and cover some more material.
All right, well, I have good news, I think. A couple good news. Number one, there's really no major changes as far as budgets go with our office. And along with that, the second good news is I don't have much to talk about. So I think my part of it's going to be pretty brief this year. So again, like I said, no major changes to the budget forms that you guys fill out from our office each year. Due date for budgets and that interlocal agreement report is still September 30th. As far as the interlocal agreement report, I will mention that you can either submit that along with your budget to our office, or you can submit it separately. I know some people like to get that done early, right away. That's fine, or you can submit it with your budget as well. Either way is fine. Just a reminder, budget goes to the county clerks as well as the state auditor's office and Department of Education. As far as the state auditor's office goes, we prefer you to submit online through our website, auditors.nebraska.gov. And I think for school districts, most, if not all, do that, but we do still accept hard copies in the mail. I don't, like I said, I don't know many, if any schools do that, but if you do, that is fine as well. Just because there's no kind of big issues, I thought I'd just maybe go through some of the common items our staff sees as they're going through reviewing the budgets after they come into our office. So just kind of some reminders here. Again, nothing new, just mainly reminders. The biggest one is we just don't get everything with the budget submission. So not only do we need the actual budget forms themselves, but we also need a printout from the LC2. Showing that you submitted the budget to the LC2. If you have any special grant funds, we need that special grant fund list, board minutes approving the budget, proof of publication for your hearings, and then the report from the county assessors with your certified value. So just a reminder that there is some other additional items that need to come in with your budget besides just the forms themselves. Next one there. Beginning balances do not agree to prior year ending balances. So just kind of a reminder, if you reported your balance in your general fund was $100 on last year's budget, unless there was some type of error, that should be what you're starting the next year with. So just make sure that beginning balances from one year, agree to the prior year ending balances from last year's budget. Or if last year's budget was wrong, but if you're making it agree to your audit report or the AFR, that would be fine as well, if there was some type of error last year. Common question that I get is what happens if the school board adopts a budget that is different than what was originally published in the newspaper for the summary of our budget. And the answer to that is the statutes say that you need to do a second publication explaining and informing the public what changed. And that publication would need to happen within 20 days after the budget is adopted. And as long as you do that, that would all be all you have to do there. So just a reminder there, if something changes between the publication and the final budget, to get that summary of changes in the newspaper. As far as budget amendments go, we're kind of getting down to the end of the year, closer to the end of the year here. So just a reminder that if you do have any funds that are going to go over budget, you want to make sure you get the amendment done before the end of the fiscal year. And then file that amendment with our office, Department of Education, and your county clerks. We do have examples for the publication and instructions on that amendment process on our website. But typically I say it's pretty much the same as what you go through to originally adopt your budget. So you're going to publish notice of your proposed budget amendment. You're going to hold a hearing on your budget amendment, and then your board is going to adopt. So it's pretty much the same process that you would go through to originally adopt the budget each year. As far as what needs to be submitted with your budget for your budget amendment, we only need the pages of the budget that change. So there's a bunch of pages you submit to us. If there's any of those that don't have any change, you don't have to resubmit the entire budget. We only need those pages that change, as well as the minutes where the board approved the amendment, and then proof of publication for your amendment hearing. That's all I have on budgets this year. Like I said, no real changes, so not a whole lot to talk about there. Just one last reminder on the audit side. Again, just reminders here, no changes. Audit reports are due to our office by November 5th. Same thing, you can submit them online through our website, or you can mail in hard copies to us. And again, a reminder here, there is a penalty. There is a statute that gives our office the authority to assess a $20 per day late fee for each day that audit report is late. So we don't like to assess that. It's really, we kind of use that more for the entities that are really just negligent, really not following up on the audit process. So we don't want to, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that we do have that authority to assess the late fee. Typically, we recommend if something happens, we understand things happen. If your audit's not going to be submitted by November 5th, just let us know. Let us know what's going on, what problems you're running into. If you have an estimate of when that budget will, or that audit will get into our office, that would be helpful for us. Otherwise, our staff will probably be contacting you asking where that audit is. So if you could kind of just keep us informed from the get-go, that would be helpful as far as office goes. Otherwise, that's really all I have. Any questions in the chat or anything?
No questions.
All right, thank you.
Hello, I'm Stephanie DeGroat, and I do have a joke for you today. We'll see if it's any better than Bryce's. An accountant was having difficulty sleeping and went to see the doctor. Doctor, I just can't get to sleep at night. And the doctor says, well, have you tried counting sheep? Well, yeah, but that's the problem. I make a mistake and then I spend 3 hours trying to find it. Okay, so we're going to talk about the budget forms. On our SFOS website, there is a link called Budgeting School District. Here you will find all the budget forms and related materials for completing your documents. There's a link to the APA's website, which has the budget forms and the corresponding instructions. There's a link for the LC2 and corresponding instructions. And then, of course, the budget text, the budget timeline, a checklist of all the documents you will need to file, and your expenditure exclusions. The budget text is an explanation of budget terms. It talks about taxing funds and levies, access to unused budget authority, levy and expenditure exclusions, and then, of course, procedures for holding a special election, such as a levy override or exceeding your budget authority. The budget document instruction manual is a step-by-step manual on how to complete each of your budget forms. There's an in-depth reference to statute, and then any legislative updates are also noted in this manual. Certified Budget Authority. This is certified on or before March 1st each year. It has your budget authority, so your expense limit, so to speak, any allowable reserve percentage, and then access to unused budget authority. If you reference the budget text, you can see a full calculation of how this is done through budget, student growth, or formula-based, and then note that the numbers for this will pre-populate into the LC2 for you. Are you up against budget authority? There are provisions in statute that allow specific items to be outside of the general fund expenditure limit. Make sure that when you're calculating your budget that you're utilizing these exclusions, such as special grant funds list, early childhood, short-term borrowing. When you're calculating your budget, make sure that you're estimating your sped expenses properly. Reference the prior 2 years and see what your trends are. And then always try to account for the potential unexpected. You never know if mid-year you will have a family that will move into your district and you may need to hire an additional teacher or buy a vehicle with special accommodations. Also, don't forget about your retirement contributions and impact aid. If you need to hold a public vote to exceed budget authority, there's ballot language that must include a statement to include access to expenditure exclusions. The amount is approved for 1 year and it will become part of the base next year. Total allowable reserves. This is a budgeting tool to help you with cash flow, but note that it is not cash in the bank. The data entered into the budget worksheets would be specifically for the general fund, depreciation fund, and employee benefit fund. Something to consider as you're coming to a close this year is what is your projected cash balance in the general fund going to be on August 31st? Do you have enough to cover 3 or 4 months of expenses if you have a shortfall month, say when the taxes aren't coming in January, February, and March? If not, this is something you may want to consider budgeting additional funding for so that you can meet those needs. The information from the total allowable reserves entered onto your budget worksheets will pre-populate into the LC2 so that you can ensure that you are not exceeding your allowable amount. Now, how we calculate total allowable reserves is a percentage based on your district's average daily membership. So, for example, if your general fund budget is $5 million, your allowable reserve percentage would be 45% or $2,250,000. There's more detail about this listed in the budget text. Okay, on to the budget forms. The first page that you come across is your basic data input page. This is where you will enter your current year valuations and your prior year valuations. The data entered into this page will flow to the rest of your budget forms. Now, while you're planning your budget, you can enter an estimated valuation for the current year or potentially enter in a formula to help you calculate different varying increases that you may or may not see. And then you can always update this form when the certified valuations come in August. Allowable growth percentage. This is 2% plus real growth. The data will pre-populate into this form from your other data pages. It is important to note that towards the bottom of the page, the document will say political subdivision does not need to go to a joint public hearing, or it must go to a joint public hearing. So make sure that you're reviewing this document for accuracy and to note whether you do or do not need to have a joint public hearing. Now, if you do need to go to a joint public hearing, you must submit the data to the county assessor by September 4th. Okay, the fund worksheet pages. This is where your fun really begins. There are 3 columns on each of the worksheet pages. The actual column, or the first column, is data that should come directly from your 2022-23 audit. You will want to reference the supplemental pages of your audit. It will show you the beginning and ending cash balances, and it will also provide you details on your expenses and revenues. Now, just one thing to note is this column is one of the checkpoints that the auditor's office reviews. They would, as Jeff mentioned a few minutes ago, they review for accuracy to make sure that how you ended the prior year is how you're starting the current year. So make sure this column is accurate. The second column is your actual estimated column, and that is what are your current year actual expenses. Now, there's a couple different ways to enter into this column. You can make an estimated amount for where you think you stand for the year, or you can run a year-to-date financial report, then estimate July and August expenses and enter your information here. Probably the only real thing that you need to consider for this column is what is your ending balance going to be? What do you project your cash in the bank will be on August 31st? And the reason that this is something important to be paying attention to is because do you have that 3 to 4 months set aside for the shortfall months, or do you need to consider budgeting for additional cash reserve in the next year's budget? Third column, this is where you're going to plan what you're going to spend. Couple of things to keep in mind. Do you anticipate any salary increases? Do you know what that percentage is? Get that calculated in and accounted for. Here's where we will estimate your spend expenditures. Think about again, what are your trending habits for the prior 2 years? What would happen if you had something expected, happen in your district where you needed to purchase a vehicle or hire another teacher? Some other things to consider as you're going through the fund worksheets is, do you need to buy another bus or an SUV? What about increased food costs or fuel costs? Some of those things are items that you'll want to consider as you're working through each of these fund worksheets. Now, as you get to the bottom of the adopted budget column, this is where you will enter your property tax request. Now, once you've entered your property tax request, you can see, and if you scroll back to the beginning pages of your budget document, you will see how entering these numbers will flow through to those pages. Specifically, your budget hearing and your special hearing are 2 documents to note. Your budget hearing is what you will publish in the paper, but it also shows your trending habit for the prior 2 years. And then the special hearing page will show a comparison of where you are on your levy. Are you within your levy limits? How does it compare to last year's operating budget and levy limits? And then the other thing that we want to recommend is to save your budget documents often and upload, at least after you enter the taxing funds, upload to the LC2 to make sure you're within your expenditure limits, your levy limits, and your property tax limits. And then you can come back and you can fine tune the worksheets as necessary.
We've got a question.
Yes.
If the AFR differs from last year's budget for the actual column, do we use the AFR? And where do we explain this?
Do you want to answer it or do you want me to?
If the AFR differs from last year's budget for the actual column, do we use the AFR?
It's not, yes, so we're not concerned about what last year's budget, because that would have been the middle column, the actual estimated column, which isn't real information, it's not, it's estimated. So you are using either the AFR or the audit for the actual column.
I think Jeff noted that the beginning and ending balances needed to match. So there, this does happen. So you can just write that message on the budget form, page 2 through
If-
3.
If last year's actual column ending doesn't match the beginning balance for the 22-23 starting point, then you would write the note saying we agreed it to the audit, or that's typically what would be done in that situation. Good question.
Okay, so some budget data entry reminders. As you're entering your data into the worksheet pages, make sure that you are entering the correct state aid amount. This comes directly from your state aid certification document. And then also your motor vehicle taxes should be a dollar amount similar to the prior year. No major changes should be noted. Also, in each of your taxing funds, you must enter a county treasurer's balance. Now, this is an estimated amount, and you can reference your audit or prior year budget for examples of what you could enter there. But again, it's an estimated amount, but you must have something noted. Any beginning and ending balances should match the audit as we just spoke about. And if you have any questions, we're always available, so don't hesitate to give us a call or send us an email. All right, as we spoke about a minute ago, the budget worksheet data will flow through to pages 2 through 4 of your budget forms, as well as Schedule B. This will show the data in a snapshot of your budget, so to speak. It is important to know that each of the cells in these pages has a formula attached to it. So please do not hand key in any information in pages 2, 3, 4, or Schedule B. The data from these pages also is what uploads into the LC2. So we want to make sure we don't corrupt any formulas as we're entering the data. Okay, current year budget reminders. Make sure, again, you are reviewing your current budget to avoid any overspending or to see if an amendment is required. If spending authority remains in the general fund, you may want to consider transferring to some of those funds to, say, the depreciation fund, the employee benefit fund, school nutrition fund, or the activity fund. And again, note that any unspent general fund budget authority will increase the 2024-25 beginning general fund cash balance, which again will help you determine whether you may or may not need to budget for additional cash reserves. All right, if you need to amend the current year's budget, per statute, you must amend before overspending occurs. You are required to amend if any fund will exceed the budget, the total budget of disbursements and transfers out. You also must hold a hearing and have it board approved by August 31st. Make sure you note that total requirements must equal total resources available, and also that the property tax request cannot change if the tax levy has been set. Now, some of the required action for amending your budget would be the hearing notice. It should note that what the budget was as it was originally adopted, and then, of course, your proposed amended budget, the rationale for amending the budget, and then you might want to consider including a statement that says no impact to district tax levy. Some of the documents that you will need to submit to the state auditors, the county clerk, and NDE after you amend would be proof of publication, board minutes, and of course, page 2 of the budget document. Now, if you need to amend your budget, you also may need to consider, do you need to upload and amend the LC2? Now, the LC2 affects the general fund, the depreciation fund, and the employee benefit fund. So if you're amending one of these funds, you may need to contact us so we can unlock your LC2, because you will want to re-upload to the LC2, make sure everything flows through and calculates correctly, and that you do not exceed any of your limitations before going to board approval. Okay, so I'm also your pupil transportation person. Yay. We have recently updated the website. In fact, it will post later today. There is new contact information on the website. So if you have questions about school bus inspections, there's a contact for Nebraska State Patrol. And then there's federal motor carrier contacts, and then my contact information as well. Couple things to note is that we're in the process of posting a 2024 pupil transportation guide, updates to beginning of school year checklist and reminders. Those will be posted by Monday. So watch next week for those new documents. Also, we're hosting a new class at admin days. The federal motor carrier will be at admin days. It is a federal requirement for all CDL drivers to have drug and alcohol testing, and then it is recommended for all of your drivers, but it is actual federal law for any CDL holders. And so there will be a class to teach you what you need to do to check if you are in compliance and to ask questions for what to do next with that type of situation. Also, something to note is rule revision starts next spring. So your drivers who are on the road, they see more than we see because we're sitting here at a desk. So if drivers are noting concerns about information in Rule 91 or 92 or the Pupil Transportation Guide, I want to invite you to send me an email with those concerns so that we can consider those at rule revision. All right, I'm going to turn things over to Teresa.
Sorry, did I miss something?
With me?
Yeah,
Oh, I said I was heading to cook this morning. If you had time around 10 o'clock, I said it was okay.
yeah.
Good morning. My name is Teresa.
I bet you did it too.
Budget season starts today, Tobin.
So I sent out RFPs this morning to those 4 companies.
You muted everybody.
All right. Now, can all of you hear me? We had a little bit of background noise, so I apologize for that. My name is Teresa Harbury, and it's nice to meet all of you. I just joined NDE in March. Today I'm going to share some important information with you about exclusions and the LC2. First, let's start with general fund exclusions. There are 2 types of exclusions: levy exclusions and expenditure exclusions. And both of these types of exclusions allow for more flexibility in your budgeting. Levy exclusions allow districts to levy more than the $5 levy limit, and state board approval is not needed. While expenditure exclusions allow districts to spend more than their certified budget authority, most expenditure exclusions do not or do need state board approval. Expenditure exclusions that do not require state board approval are items such as special education expenses, and this includes SPED transportation and any SPED related student services, which includes the 2100s but excludes the 2190s. Special grant funds are also considered an expenditure exclusion to the general fund. The special grant funds list can be found in Section V of the LC2. There are numerous programs which have already been pre-approved by the state board. So if you are concerned you're going to exceed your budget authority, please make sure to review the special grant funds list and see if you can utilize any of the special grants as an exclusion. In LC2, at the bottom of the special grant funds list, there is a series of exclusions that do require state board approval. And each of these items are marked with an asterisk, and that's because they are specific to your school district. These include items such as insurance settlements, interfund loans between taxing funds, reimbursements for awards of the court, repayments to county governments for previous overpayments, short-term borrowing, grants from city or county government, and grants from corporations, foundation, and other private interests. Also, I want to share some important information with you about the School Safety and Security Act grant. This grant is not listed on the special grant fund list. However, if your district needs the exclusion, please make sure that you submit a request on school letterhead and submit it under the supplemental grants exclusion. Early childhood grants are pre-populated into the LC2. While early childhood education grants do need state board approval, these grants will remain in your budget base for calculating future budget authority. As for the new elementary attendance site, to utilize this exclusion, you must have already qualified for the elementary site allowance. And this exclusion is for costs related to your first year of operation, such as salaries, utilities, and building maintenance. Next, we have Schedule A. Schedule A can be found in your budget document. And when uploading your budget document into the LC2, Schedule A will automatically pre-populate. Schedule A is where you will find your general fund exclusions. And this is where you will enter things such as repairs to infrastructure, judgments, distance education, voluntary terminations, retirement contributions, and the funding from Native American Impact Aid. When submitting requests that need state board approval, the templates for exclusions are available in the budget section of NDE's Finance and Organizational Services website. When completing the templates, please include your district agency ID and always use round numbers. The approval of exclusion requests is listed on NDE's website within 5 working days after each board meeting. Also, it's important to note that you can include exclusion requests in your budget planning before state board approval has been posted. So if you need to submit a request for state board approval, please send in your request, and my email address is listed on the screen. In the LC2, which is also referred to as the LID computation form, it's located in the NDE portal, and a new activation code is required each year. Instructions for how to navigate through the LC2 can be found on NDE's Finance and Organizational Services website. When you upload your budget form to the LC2, make sure it's in Excel format. Also, if you're a new superintendent this year, you will need to get registered in the NDE portal. If you need help with the NDE portal, you can call or email the advisor help desk, and I have listed the contact information for you on the screen. Now, if you are a new superintendent or a new business manager, you might be wondering, well, what's the purpose of the LC2? Well, the LC2 will confirm your budget is in compliance and does not exceed limitations. Error messages will appear in red if limitations are exceeded. Also, as I showed you a few minutes ago, within the LC2, you will find a list of special grant funds. The LC2 will calculate your unused budget authority, and ultimately, the goal is to get your unused budget authority down to 0. Once your budget has been approved and adopted, make sure you send copies of all of your supporting documents to the APA's office, to your county clerk's office, and then make sure that you upload your supporting documents for NDE as a single PDF through the LC2. Each year, when we certify your budget authority, the value of the unused budget authority will automatically pre-populate in the LC2 in Section A. If you have any unused budget authority, the value will be listed on the left-hand side, and I have it circled in red for you. You will need to enter that amount on the right side of the screen in cell A355, and your total allowable budget authority will appear beneath that in cell A780.
We have a question. Why is the goal to get unused budget authority to 0?
So I don't know if I would say that's the goal, but it's something to consider because the impacts budget authority, if you budget it, is in your base and you have access to it in future years. If you don't include it in your budget, you lose the ability to access that budget authority in future years. So the full amount of it, you can access up to 2% of your adjusted gross or your adjusted budget amount each year. So you can get to a little bit of it, but it makes a lot of sense if I was in a school that I would want to have the ability to access that if needed in future years. It doesn't require you to tax for anything extra. You can work your budget through so that your tax asking is not impacted by including that additional budget authority, but it does show as additional expenditures on your budget. Definitely makes sense to use budget authority up instead of necessary cash reserves on your budget. If you have necessary cash reserves being used to get to your tax asking amount. So there's a lot going on with it. If you're thinking about not including all of your budget authority or have more further questions on it, I would highly recommend reaching out to one of us so we can talk through the implications of either doing that or not doing that and what that might look like for your specific district.
Oh, I believe Jeff Anderson might have a question.
I think we've got one more question. Did you say there was another question?
Yeah, I was trying to, how do I unmute him now? Jeff, see if you can unmute yourself. You have a question. I can't unmute it.
Go on. You'll have to type that question in since you're having trouble. Go on, Teresa.
I did go ahead and move forward or join. Okay.
Go on.
All right, next. If you held a successful election for additional budget authority, you will need to indicate so in the LC2. You'll need to enter the amount of the increase that was approved by the voters in the special election. Also in the LC2, you will be asked if you held a successful election of your patrons for a levy override. If the answer is yes, you will need to provide some additional information about the levy override. For example, you'll need to list the total property tax levy that was approved by the patrons in the excess of $1.05. In addition, you will need to list how many years the levy override will be in effect. And furthermore, you'll be asked to identify the first year the levy override will be in effect and also when the levy override will expire. Next is section D, which is the property tax authority section. And that was added last year. When you upload your budget to the LC2, your certified assessed valuation and property tax request authority will pre-populate into the LC2 for you. Next,
Maybe start back at that slide, I'm sorry.
it's my understanding that I was muted for this last slide, so I am very sorry for that. So I will start at the beginning with section D, which is the property tax authority. And it's my understanding that this section was new. It was added to the LC2 last year. When you upload your budget to the LC2, your certified assessed valuation and property tax request authority will pre-populate into the LC2 for you. Next, you will be asked if 70% of the school board approved to exceed the certified property tax request authority. If you answer yes, the maximum amount allowed will show in the next line. However, in cell D140, you will need to enter the amount that was actually approved by the school board, and that value can be lower than the maximum amount allowed. Also in the LC2, the amount for total property tax authority allowed will be shown in section D. And on the slide, you will see a red arrow next to cell D310. You will be asked for the amount of the total property tax reduced as a result of increased spend in foundation aid. If you enter 0, you will be contacted because we do need an actual amount entered in that cell. And finally,
I'm gonna jump in there, sorry.
Yeah.
We'll check, like Teresa said, we'll call you and check with you if you enter 0 there. But it is allowable, so you can put 0 in that line. But you'll probably get just a caution or a warning from us if that's what you're intending to do. Making sure you're prepared to answer any questions from senators or the governor's office or others that come your direction if that's the case.
thank you. Next, we have some tips and tricks when working in the LC2. First, you have unlimited uploads to check the status of limitations. Also, remember to recalculate and save often. When entering your special grant funds, make sure that you click on the Save button. And last but not least, make sure to upload your supporting documents in a PDF format after you have the district's approval. Unfortunately, you cannot submit your LC2 if there are any error messages. The error messages will appear in red. You'll receive an error message in red if you exceed your unused budget authority. If you receive an error message, you will need to return to your budget and make the necessary corrections or adjustments, and then re-upload to the LC2. And don't forget to see if you can utilize any of the exclusions. To conclude my piece of the presentation, I'm going to summarize what I've covered by providing you a checklist. The checklist will be helpful to you as you're working in your budget. First, did you send in your expenditure exclusion request? Next, make sure you're utilizing the LC2 while working on your budget. Is your budget within the spending, levy, and property tax limits? Does your LC2 match your budget? Is a joint public hearing required? Does the hearing notice match the budget document? Did you publish your hearing notices? Be sure to reserve adequate time for public comment at your budget hearing. Make sure to submit your budget documents to NDE, the APA's office, and your county clerks by September 30th. And finally, remember to submit your property tax resolution to the county by October 15th. And finally, as a friendly reminder, the only way for you to submit your budget documents to NDE is through the LC2. No paper forms will be accepted to NDE. Your budget documents need to be uploaded to the LC2 as a single PDF document by September 30th. You will receive a confirmation email from NDE once your LC2 has been reviewed and approved. And that concludes my part of the presentation, and I'll turn it over to Michelle.
How are you?
Yeah, I need a bridge loan, if you could. 200K. Good. What can I tell you? I've been fucking bushing.
All right, hello, everyone. I'm Michelle Cartwright, as she mentioned, and I am your new school finance, director of school finance. And I'm going to go over items related to state aid reporting and then a little bit of AFR reporting at the end. So we're going to start with things that are upcoming for you, kind of in order so that you can put those things on your radar. In the next couple of weeks, districts that qualified or had a positive year correction for the 23-24 state aid will be getting a notification from NDE that you qualify. You must respond by August 15th that you would like to receive that lump sum payment. And then by September 15th, we're gonna have the state board approve that. If you do want to receive that lump sum payment, then that will be sent out to you with your first payment in September. If you do not let us know, then we'll just assume that you would like that lump sum divided amongst the 10 payments as they are sent out. If the lump sum amount is less than $1,000, we're automatically going to make that distribution to you with the first payment that is in September. I wanted to point out the picture of the Rule 8 document. This document is a compilation of all things school finance, budgeting, all the laws that pertain to school finance. It's, as Bryce put it, it's a much friendlier version to read than actually going out to the statute. So it does mention statute, but it's in a much friendlier language for all of us to understand. So if you haven't read that and you are bored sometime, you might take a look at that. It actually has some good information in there. If your school district is going to have change of boundaries due to annexation by a city or village, you're going to see a notification in our upcoming newsletter that there's a form for you to request from us, and that must be completed by your district. We will need that form back by August 20th to utilize that in our stating calculations. This also could have some impact on ESUs as well. So if that's happening to you, make sure that you request that form, and then we'll get that out to you immediately so you can complete it. Next, wanted to point out, if you aren't familiar with the TEEOSA document, it's about 17 pages, and it explains all the components that are state aid and how those calculations are brought in and how they impact the full calculation. It's definitely a resource for you if you're not sure how something is how something could impact your state aid calculation. There's also a companion FAQ document that is, as the name is, it's FAQ. If there's some questions that you don't want to ask or want to look into it more, how is poverty calculated? How are needs calculated? So actually a really good document too to take a peek at to give you some more in-depth knowledge of how the state aid is calculated. So if any of you have been around more than a year, you know that the NDE uses the portal as our way of collecting information for all of our collections. Stephanie and Teresa talked about the LC2, so you'll see the LC2 on the main dashboard of the portal. We're going to talk about the consolidated data collection, so your CDC. So once you enter the CDC, is where the majority of the state aid collection, state aid utilized collections are going to be there for you. Currently, instructional program hours are being updated and due the 15th. We have the audit window until June 30th, and then people transportation. All districts should be in there and been doing that reporting. And if you don't have people transportation, we still ask you to go in there and click that you do not have anything. Again, there's an audit window, so you might be getting some phone calls from some of us following up on that data if it's not done. Again, this just reiterating the due dates for instructional programming, people transportation. The next one that's coming up is your Superintendent Pay Transparency Act. It's in red for a reason because it's important. That one's due on or before August 1st. Reason it's important is that the timeline is required by statute. So on or before August 1st, you need to submit your contract in PDF format, superintendent contracts in PDF format to that portal. And the portal's actually open all year round. So if there's some amendments, changes, superintendent changes, interim put in place, you are required to upload that new contract information to the website. We also have you complete the Schedule D in the budget form, and that's required to be completed and submitted with your budget by September 30th. So the message here is that if you don't get that information submitted by October 1st, there's some potential that by statute, we would have to withhold your state and local funds from the school district until that has been submitted. So just make sure that's on your radar and you're getting that information updated into the portal. Again, if we're not seeing that information in there, we're gonna follow up with you and help you get that in there so that you don't have that withholding put in place. All right, so now for some good news. So currently the portal is getting a facelift. I'm not sure what that's gonna look like to the external users. We haven't seen that yet. But what I feel like is great news is that we're going to make your life a little bit easier on the amount of collections that you have to keep track of that need to be submitted. So there'll be a new umbrella collection called TEEOSA State Aid Collection. And under that umbrella, you're going to see the following 6 collections within that. So you'll be able just to go one place and then fill out and enter your information into your valuations, elementary side allowance if it qualifies. So all of those collections will be under one name. You can expect that to be opening for this year, and all of those are due October 15th. The PK instructional hours, program hours, that will still be at separate standalone, but otherwise the ones above will be in its own collection.
Okay, hold on.
Yes.
No, we're gonna go back a slide. Question, is Schedule D required to be on the website too? So you're not required to put Schedule D on your website. That's just required to be submitted with the budget, it's part of the state budget. But you are required to post, if you're a returning superintendent, 2 days prior to your board meeting, when your board is voting to extend or renew your contract, you have to put that on your website. Probably best practice, we've always said, to be transparent is just to keep a copy of your contract on the website. I know a lot of schools do that. I've went out and just kind of looked to see what schools are doing there. So that's pretty common occurrence. But you are required then to submit that copy of the contract to us. And even if you don't have any changes to it, re-upload it each year so that we know that there's no changes to it and we have the latest version on our websites. Because lots of times I know superintendent may have 3-year contract and then they renew that each year and add another year to it, or there's a lot of different circumstances out there. So you're not required to put Schedule D on your website. That just has to be at the budget, but you do need to post it on your website before it's renewed. If it's a new superintendent, you have 3 days after the board meeting when they approve it to put it up on your website. There's no specific time period that it says it must be up there, but I would say, it needs to be reasonable and not up for 10 minutes or something.
Okay. Another note I wanted to make about these collections is the importance of making sure that the data that you enter into it is correct. This past year, we had a couple school districts that did not get the correct amount entered and for their estimated expenditures for poverty and LEP, and it's going to have a negative impact on them. And we can't go back and correct that information after the fact. So make sure that information you're entering is correct, or someone else is entering it for you, that you're the final reviewer. In this case, someone else has entered the information, and then the district administrator signed off on it without double checking the information.
Can I jump in?
Yes.
All right. One thing I want to note on this one, and I'll talk a little bit here about what may be going on in the legislative session. But if you are following what's going on in the legislative session, there's a lot of discussion about changing the TEEOSA formula, potentially creating more equalization. I've heard a lot of different ideas. The reason I bring that up is there are very few equalized school districts right now for 24-25. If a significant rewrite of the formula occurs, one or a few of the different things that I've seen or heard people talk about would involve significant equalization concepts coming back into the formula that could result in the vast majority of districts being equalized. And why that matters and why I'm talking about that now is poverty and LEP allowance may not have mattered to you for a very long time or ever if you've been non-equalized necessarily, although it could impact your budget authority. But if I was at a school district with the unknowns that are out there with what legislature may do, I think real hard about making sure I put in a poverty and LEP amount for this next year. If you have, I'm confident probably everybody has some poverty students in their district. you may not have LAP, you want to be a little more careful there. Because of the requirements to actually spend 117.65% of whatever you enter. But if equalization becomes a thing again, those two will have a big impact on how much equalization aid you get. So just to put that in the back of your mind, something to think about. And be glad to talk more about that. We'll be covering that. I'm sure we'll cover that out at admin days later this summer too. And glad to go through that more, but I want to put that on people's radar.
So if you enter those amounts, then that means then for the following year that you're coding those expenditures to the 1150 and 1160, I think those are. So we pick up those amounts that then are reported in the AFR. So making sure that you're doing proper coding. Okay, here is a snapshot of what that collection is going to look like. Welcome to the TEEOSA state aid collection. So you see on the left where it has each of those collections, and you'll enter into those. Either sign off that you're not using it or put your information in. And then once you complete the last one, then it has the ability for, actually, I think each collection, then the person entering will submit it, and then the final district administrator will approve it. And then you're done. Okay, new collection this year that was legislature driven is the enrollment option rejection report. So that report is going to open, or that collection is going to open July 1, so Monday, and then close the 31st. We recommend getting in there as soon as possible and get your information entered. The collection will be asking you how many applications were received, how many applications were denied. Of those denied, how many had an IEP or diagnosis of a disability. And then the collection goes on to ask you what reasons were the applications denied. NDE then is going to compile this information, and then we must submit it to the legislature by September 1. We do anticipate opening the collection earlier next year, closer to the end of your school year. But this year, the statutory date was July 1st. So you'll be getting more information in the July newsletter that goes out Monday to help you navigate to that. And then directions will be within that collection if you have any concerns, but don't hesitate to reach out to us. There potentially could be some changes to it next year as well, based on feedback from the legislature. Okay, so we talked about the CDC collections. Now, the other portion of the portal is the advisor part of it. This is where your student information system, your SIS, downloads information to advisor. It's very important that those are communicating properly. We found last year during our audits that there's probably around 30 districts that the information was not being downloaded correctly due to some possible coding issues or identifiers put on the students. This information is very important. We're capturing the fall membership from the advisor, and then also the average daily membership. So our focus on these numbers is the CA calculation and your SPED. So very important that information is reviewed ever so often. Don't wait till the end of the year. You could be looking at that the first couple months of the school year, making sure that you've got the new students in there and the proper coding on the students. Real quick, we are reviewing the ADM information right now. So if we see any major discrepancies from year over year, you might be getting contacted from us on having you check those numbers as well. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the 24-24 recalculation. We certified in February this year. We do that typically before March 1st. Last year we did have to recertify due to legislature changes, but we did not have that this year. So certification brings in fall membership, the assessed valuations, and the 22-23 annual financial information that was submitted. So when the AFR is being submitted, we are working hard to get you locked down because we roll right into doing the certification. So that's the importance of getting that information in correct the first time and on time.
Sorry, go ahead. One more thing. So that's not up on the slide, or maybe you were going to hit on it. I jumped in too soon.
Go ahead.
But the IRS low income data, that we didn't receive on time again this year. We had to last year, we did receive that at the end of July. We're still pushing to try and get that information updated in the recalculation. So that could be a change of impacting your district as well if you are an equalized district getting poverty allowance.
Okay, so upcoming, we'll be doing the recalculation, as Bryce said, if we have that new data, we'll get that built into there. Whereas certification takes the fall membership, now we're gonna pull in the average daily membership to the calculation. We also will have received the certified evaluations, and then any district that had an amendment to their AFR, that new data will be brought in as well. So all amendments will need to be completed by July 15th to make sure that new data is pulled into the calculation. Okay, so so for the 24-25 recalculation, we have the A1 document that's out there now. When we do that recalculation, those documents will be updated for you. During that recalculation, the local effort rate may change because it's a balancing factor from the information that is updated. Okay, the prior year correction, how that's shown. So when we do the recertification, it is causing a correction. So you will see that prior year correction on the following year's certification. So we're looking at the 23-24 certification. We're doing the 23-24 recalculation, and you're seeing that prior year correction on the upcoming certification. Okay, we talked a little bit about the LEP and poverty expenditure before. This is just making sure that from the 23-24 expenditures are exceeding that will be shown. I'm sorry, let me back up here. So the information that you're reporting on your 22-23 AFR, we're taking those numbers and we'll be presenting a report that shows that 117.65 of expenditures are expected for the next year. So you're going to want to make sure that you are coding to the proper LEP and poverty codes. Sorry, I lost my way here. So if you don't spend that 117%, then you potentially could open yourself up for a correction in the upcoming recap. So very important that you are coding correctly and making sure that you're reaching that 117% threshold. We do have built into the AFR as part of the errors and warnings section step that if you did not code to the proper amount, it's going to give you the opportunity to go back and update your accounting software and get those corrections made to reach that 117% and then re-upload and work your way back through the AFR. So there is some opportunities for you to make sure that you're reaching those numbers. Okay, this is just touching base on fall membership reporting again. So fall membership, the fall school district membership is reported as of October 1st is what we're using for that. Want to make sure that you are getting your qualified early childhood membership in there as well, because we're using that as of October 1st.
Bryce, there's a question.
All right, there's a question that popped up in the chat. I'm going to cover that when I get to my part on special session. So just hang tight on that question about special session.
Okay. Now we're going to move into the annual financial report. So again, this collection is found in the portal. Collection opens October 1st and the submission is due by November 1st. So we will be helping you get to that finish line of November 1st. We realize that some of you may not have your audits by then, but statutorily, we do have to have you locked down by November 1st. You're going to utilize the AFR summary report that's in there. and making sure that that's aligning with, your audit. Again, the information in there must align with the audit. If we find during our review that you have, some funds or some balances that don't match, there's a $200 threshold. So if there's something that's not aligning, we will be contacting you and having you make those corrections in your software and potentially re-uploading. It may cause you to have to work with your auditor to find out what, the differences were, but, the AFR must match the submitted audit. So right now, getting ready for, submission, we want to make sure that you know that we've revised the master code or the user's manual and the master code list. We do that 2 times a year. Typically, November, December is the first one for the year. And then we do, an update in May so that we can capture any, potential new grant codes or any changes that we might have, needed to put in place for, could be numerous, things that we might need to update. So make sure that you're referring to those latest revisions. You also right now have the opportunity to be uploading your financial data now. So export that file and then utilize the test upload site so that you can make sure that you're using the proper codes and you won't have any errors. This is going to help you so much when it's time to actually start doing the AFR upload, and you'll have those coding errors out of the way. We're hearing that the coding errors are getting fewer and fewer as everyone gets familiar with the master code list and gets that information in their software. But there's still times that some object codes do not align with the expense codes. So it's your perfect opportunity to get those out of the way now. And that test site is only testing for account codes. It's not testing for anything else. So it's really simple and you can do it as many times as you need. Once the AFR does open, that test site does close, and you would just be using the AFR to do that testing. So AFR coding issues that have been addressed currently, we've had some reports from the federal teams that they want to make sure that all costs associated with professional development should be coded to the following object code. So with anything related to your staff for professional development training, you want to use 330. That includes the travel and any related expenses to attend any of those professional development opportunities, whether it's at your ESU or to some other type of source. So 330, wanted to note that. And then also federal guidelines are going to be changing the threshold for between supplies into a capital expense. So currently, if it was an expense of 5,000 or more, you were coding to the 700s. That now is going to be going up to 10,000. So we'll be noting that with the upcoming master code list and users manual.
That federal regulation change for the single audit threshold, and those thresholds will go into effect October 1st. So don't change that for the current fiscal year. We'll change the user's manual on that topic. Really, for school districts, we'll jump into it a month early and start September 1st. So it's for your fiscal year, but continue doing what you're doing to finish out this fiscal year.
Okay, so a little bit earlier in the state aid area, I talked about amending your AFR. So some pretty common reasons for amending the AFR is that during an audit of maintenance of effort, there were some costs that weren't coded correctly or weren't coded enough. So making sure that you're coding spend costs to your regular education numbers. There could be, basically it's just, most times it's coding that's done improperly between the grants, either the state grants, the federal grants. So typically during those reviews is when those are caught and they're failing your reimbursement request, and you're having to go back and make those changes to those account codes. So, throughout the year, make sure that you are coding correctly, and that'll save you the effort and the time of doing an amendment. Okay, one note there too, to make sure your cost for SPED for birth to pre-K is coded to IDA. There's no state reimbursement for birth to pre-K. Okay, also with the requirements of the AFR is that that districts can code to the building levels. So this allows the district to determine the amount that they code to the building levels. And when I say that, I'm talking the elementary level, maybe the junior high level or the high school level. You can see within the coding stream that -003, that defines what building level that you are coding to. So say the superintendent's salary, you could split between the buildings if you wanted, or you could code it to the district level. But any teacher salaries that pertain to a certain building level, you're going to want to make sure that they are being coded appropriately to the correct building level. If you code to the district level, the system is set up to allocate those expenses based on your ADM reporting. However, you cannot code more than 50% to the district. The AFR will show an error and you won't be able to proceed. You'll have to go back and change your coding. I believe that process has gotten much better as districts are, improving their coding procedures. But just know it's more more accurate information if you are actually coding, doing that breakdown beforehand and coding to the proper building levels. This is utilized in the per pupil cost. So it's really important and gives you a better accurate picture if you're doing that allocating ahead of time. We are asking the auditors, you're doing some testing to make sure that you're doing those allocations. But for the most part, they're just doing their audit on district level as a whole, not by building level. Okay, so this is a snapshot of the steps within the AFR. So just kind of noting here, the point of this is to let you know that once the AFR opens, the business manager or superintendent can be in here starting to do some of these steps. The building contents in the beginning, ending cash balances are, once those numbers are entered, they're static and they stay in there. They can be revised, but there's something that you can get out of the way and get those entered. So once you get past the beginning and ending cash balances, then you can run the reports. And this is a great tool to get in there and run your AFR summary, and you can start matching up if your auditor's been in and is preparing some reports, so you can start to see if there are some discrepancies that have been submitted in the AFR to the audit. So on the value of the building and contents, we use 3% of the values that are entered to is brought in for your per pupil cost. The best tool to use is your property insurance values of the buildings. You'll do this per building. This information is pre-populated from the previous year, so you don't have to start over. We just ask that you do the updates to it. There's been questions on what are district related facilities, because you'll see that line in the step. District related items are like your bus barn, your administrative building, athletic builds. Think of things that K through 12 share. And so that would be what you would list in there as your district values. There are some minimum thresholds that you've probably seen that have to be entered for each item. We also do a year-end review to make sure that this information hasn't changed drastically from one year to the next. I know last year a lot of you were called because the valuations, like everything else, had went up 50%, 100% because the insurance carriers hadn't been out there for a good number of years. So we are seeing that, and we were noting that, and do probably expect to see some more evaluations going up. But again, we're trying to help you make sure that correct information is in there. So if you get a call from us or an email, just know that we're truly just trying to help you get the most accurate information. Okay, so once you get through building and contents, beginning any cash balances, and you run your reports, you would be able to go into here and see all the reports that we have available for you. So the first one at the top is the special education related disbursements. I want to point out that this is Bryce's slide, so he always has nice videos. So that's on Bryce there. So the special education related report is a report of prior years AFR data submitted and the current data that you are submitting. So it gives you a year-over-year picture to kind of as a reference, and to also make sure that you've hit MOE. So if you're seeing some particular programs that aren't reaching that MOE or that are lower than prior year, it gives you the opportunity to go back and to review those programs and possibly make some changes within your software, and you have the ability at this point to re-upload, to correct your accounting software and to re-upload into the AFR. So other reports here to use, you can start to see your per pupil cost. So it's a really good tool, and definitely could be utilized more by the districts if you make yourself aware of what's in there. Okay, district audits. So the auditors are to be doing some testing on allocations of expenses at the district level. They are required with the following statement: a sample of the expense allocations were tested, verifying appropriate allocating to the building level. We have required and requested that they have the supplemental schedules in a specific format, and I think we're pretty much all there now. And seeing that shown on that reporting in the audit. The only thing that I think we've been noticing is that some of the accounts might need to be updated. So if you're seeing that on the audit before it's final, you might request your auditors to get those account codes updated. That helps you, that helps us to do our review from the AFR summary to the audit and allowing us to match up more clearly. Also, once your audit is complete and you're using your audit to fill in your budget documents, if that audit more aligns with our account codes that are listed, again, it's going to help you to make sure that you're able to read that information quickly. And if you're struggling and you're not sure what needs to be changed or fixed, just let us know. We can help you figure that out as well. So Bryce mentioned earlier, the single audit threshold will change in 24-25. So that currently was $750,000 threshold is now going to $1 million. And is that for October 1st again?
That will be for the 24-25 school year. Also, just kind of thinking through that and the implications for our state. So the combination of that threshold increasing and the ESSER funds going away, just anticipate that a lot fewer school districts are going to be subject to the single audit requirements this upcoming year. So one more reason to get those ESSER dollars spent prior to September 1, and then you don't have to possibly you can avoid a single audit next year if you're on the threshold there.
Okay. The last statement there, just verify if financial information matches district audit when uploaded into the ND financial data reporting system. So you are working directly with your auditor. So if you're running that AFR summary and you have some preliminary audit pages and they're not matching, it's definitely your opportunity then to ask them what the differences are. I have a district now that some adjusting entries got missed, and so we're working through that. So use those tools that are in the AFR summary before you submit to get that information to match your audit, so that once it's submitted, everything matches up, and then we have a seamless review, and we're not requiring you to go back to your financial data after the fact, make those changes and re-upload. If you miss making those corrections after the November 5th deadline of the audit being submitted, it could potentially require you to do an amendment instead of re-uploading your software. So very important that you get that information correct the first time, because it's going to save you a lot of extra work in the end. Okay, I think I'll have you do this slide because I think that you are more impactful on this one.
All right, so there's just a caution. We've thrown this out the last several years, but one of the concerns I think that probably is valid in our state is that in some school districts, the auditors take on a significant role in the financial statement preparation process. In fact, they're really doing it for a lot of school districts. Auditor requirements, I guess, essentially regulate that an auditor can't create the financial statements and do the audit if there's not somebody that has the ability to oversee those financial statements and understand if there's anything incorrect in them. So what we're saying there is you don't have to have a CPA on staff. You don't even have to have somebody that could put those financial statements together, but you do need to have somebody capable of looking at those financial statements and seeing if there's significant incorrect pieces to the financial statements. Auditors should be able to audit their own work without somebody overseeing and being able to recognize that there's significant issues with what was put together. So if you don't have somebody in your district that has the ability to look at financial statements and understand that, hey, these look accurate or they don't look accurate, then you need to hire separate accounting firms, one to prepare your financial statements and one to do the audit. And your auditor should be verifying that as well. You should be working with them. If they're doing your financial statements and you're not, you should be working with them to make sure that that requirement is met.
With that said, we do have, if you're struggling to find an auditor, you know, you're gonna have to make a change. We have prepared a list of auditors. We're not promoting any particular one. It's just a list of auditors that are being used statewide. And then last year we did have a new auditor start doing school districts. So that one, it would be on there as well. And we can forward that document to you if you did.
I would, on that, since we're talking about auditors right now, I just note, I have been in contact with a lot of the auditors that do school district audits across the state and working towards maybe a solution to address the shortage of auditors that we have. One of the ideas that seems to really gain weight with them, and I think I've talked to a few school districts about it, is not necessarily requiring a full financial statement audit, doing an engagement audit where we really essentially have them audit the AFR and provide that supplemental schedule. That's really what we're using. Now, I understand schools may need their financial statements audited and provided as well, especially if you're financing in a situation where you're going to be financing either going out for a bond or other type of financing situations. You might need that. What we might be able to do is really push that November 1st deadline and just get the AFR audited and that supplemental schedule, and allow the auditor and the school district additional time then to go out, which would be essentially on your own timeline to do a full financial statement audit. It's one thing to maybe help with the crunch that school district auditors feel over those 2 months in September and October, the first part of November. So just kind of an FYI, so you know that that's conversation occurring. We're looking into something like that. Kansas has done something similar, but that is out there. We're open to other ideas as well.
Okay, another part of what the auditor is doing for you is doing that EDM ADA testing. So that's the student attendance summary report, student level data to verify that ADM and ADA is correct in advisor. They're verifying a sample of the students from your student report files. They're verifying that the school district attendance report in their student information system is correct. The auditors will submit that report to you with your audit. Make sure that you are reviewing that report to see if there is any major variances on there. It should, your system should match the advisor reporting system. So if you notice the variance on that report, we're going to be reaching out to you and asking you how you're going to be addressing that variance. So how you stop that variance from happening is that you are looking at you're looking at those reports throughout the school year. Again, I mentioned that before, and just making sure that your system is uploading correctly to advisor. And so that you don't have those variances noted in your audit.
I'm going to jump in here too.
Yep.
So not every SIS is created a report that their business rules match our business rules for calculating ADM and ADA. We are working towards trying to get them all to do that, and we're getting closer. We have more of them that are matching our rules to do that. So that's just to give you a heads up. Your SIS vendor may not match. You need to go through it, and if you have areas you can identify where it's different, that would be good. The auditors will go through and they'll test individual students. If that's the case, they'll test individuals, well, they will regardless. But if all the individual students they test tie out, they'll pass you, and not have an issue there just because business rules are different and how those reports are written. Or calculated.
And I believe if they have issues, they can contact advisor help desk, correct?
The school district?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's, the end of the state aid and the AFR, information. Did want to point out that there were some changes with the enrollment option program. Rule 19 has not been updated yet, but it's still out there. We do have the new FAQ and the application is on our website. We do have a Spanish version if you so need it. Just email myself or Teresa and we'll get that sent back out to you. There's been questions on how long the applications need to be retained. Our guidance is until that student graduates or they reach age 21. And we do recommend using the most current document, and we do have it dated at the top for you. And can be linked either directly to our website or you can upload it to your own website. What's changed with the enrollment option program? So effective July 19th, they've added that the student may option once during elementary school, once during middle school or junior high, and once during high school for a total of 3 times. What the change of this is that they can do it at any time during that elementary or middle school. Before they had to follow one of the exceptions by completing the highest grade offered. So the exceptions are still available as well as that new statute language change. I mentioned before that the new collection will be opening, gathering the information that I mentioned before. So that information, we're going to be collecting that for the school year from June 1st of last year through May 31st of this year. So that would be the reporting period for that information. All right, that's the end of my presentation and Bryce is up next.
All right, I'm sure an hour and a half in, everybody's fully with us. Nobody's fallen asleep yet, so I'll promise to keep you on the edge of your seat as we finish out here the next. And it shouldn't take me too long to get through this information, I don't think so. Just wanted to highlight, I guess, what happened, and I know I've spoke on these topics a little bit, but it seems like we always need to make sure that there's not misunderstandings out there across the state. So the key school finance legislation that was passed during this 2024 session, LB 71, which allows 5-year-olds to attend your pre-K programs now. I think the key word there that people need to understand is it's allows, it doesn't require. So you can allow 5-year-olds now to attend those pre-K programs as of July 1st. So meaning they're kindergarten eligible, but elects to not go to kindergarten that year and will go the following year instead. That change also said, hey, we're going to add those kids into the TEEOSA formula student calculation, meaning if you are, when we calculate formula students, which is used for foundation aid, so even if you're not equalized, if you're equalized, it's going to contribute or have an impact on equalization aid. I'm really curious to see how that impacts it because those costs are already in the TEEOSA general fund operating expenditures, GFOE. So the expenditures are in there, the students just haven't been. So it may have an interesting or inverse actual impact on TEEOSA when that occurs. But for foundation aid, non-equalized districts, it's going to grow your formula student count, which means it'll increase your foundation aid for your district. But keep in mind, it won't be the full $1,500 that you're getting for a kindergarten through 12th grade kid because pre-K kids are only counted at most at 0.6 if it's a full session of a FTE. And if it's less, like if you go halftime, it's going to be 0.3. So you're not getting the full $1,500. LB 1329 added this one has gotten a lot of questions on. I think there's probably a lot of schools that are interested in possibly taking advantage of this change, but LB 1329 added school safety investment infrastructure as an allowable use to the QC Buff Qualified Capital Purpose Undertaking Fund. Keep in mind that that fund allows a maximum of 3 cents for what you can raise in 7 years to tax for that or pass a bond by your board to address those concerns. If you are just taxing in that fund for that purpose, it will count towards your $5 max levy. If you're paying back a bond, then it is not part of the $5 max levy. Always, I think, an important distinction for people to understand. One of the things there too, I got asked early on right after that bill passed somewhere, and I can't remember where. I wish I could, so I could correct myself. If a school resource officer could be funded out of that. I would recommend talking to your legal counsel about that question. I would answer now after rereading the language after that question got asked. I would say no, because it uses the specific term infrastructure there. And I don't think that probably qualifies. I would say that would tend to be more cameras, door locks, changing, building, entrances, those types of things as infrastructure, not a school resource officer. But you can always talk to your attorney about that, and if they think differently, that's your call. LB 1329 was also the bill that Michelle just talked about that allowed additional enrollment options for elementary, middle, and junior high school. So the other bill that did not pass, and this is, I think, probably where a lot of people are really curious to know what's going to happen, and I would say I'm in that boat as well, is LB 388 with AM 3468, which was the property tax authority / the companion bill to the property tax relief bill or school finance TEEOSA funding bill, did not pass. Obviously, if you follow the papers or the news at all, you know that the governor was less than thrilled with that occurring on the last day of the session, promised the special session. And then as of this week, end of last week, the governor sent a letter to the speaker of the legislature identifying potential special session days, which the article this morning in the papers pointed and said the Thursday of admin days, I think July 25th, right now is a possible first day of the special session. And that is not an official, they have not officially called it, but they're kind of giving a heads up to say, if we do a special session, this is when it's going to occur. And it sounds like it's likely at this point, at least that's what is being said publicly by the governor's office and what we're seeing in the newspapers. The question earlier was, what do they do if they have a special session? Well, obviously I don't know the answer to that. But I do know, had multiple conversations with governor's office, with other senators over there, to say, any changes that occur that impact TEEOSA, impact budgeting, property tax authority, have to be pushed off towards 25, 26. At this point, you can't change a school district's TEEOSA, you can't change their property tax authority in August. That just does not work with the timing of everything else that's just jam-packed now with joint public hearings and property tax authority overboard votes to override, those types of things. So I would say that there has been no pushback on that. And I think we've got them to the point where they agree. I think what you have certified to you for 24, 25, you can go ahead and proceed with and plan on for this year. That would be I feel pretty confident in that assessment, I guess. What I would also say though is I feel confident is it is absolutely worth you paying very close attention to what happens in this special session. I know that there's multiple ideas being floated. And I believe that there'll be more than just a governor's recommendation bill that is introduced in a special session. I think there'll be alternative options out there. And I think that they need to hear the impacts from school districts. I think school districts did a good job during the session this year to alert them to what are you seeing for impacts of property tax authority that was passed last year? What's going to happen to your school districts in years 2, 3 of LB 243 and 583 being passed in the 23 session? A lot of that is unknown to the legislature and the governor's office at this point. What they know and what they were reacting to is what your budgets looked like last fall. Obviously, that became a very hot topic. Property tax authority is going to continue to be in the crosshairs, I think, and what they do there. I am confident that that conversation is not done. I'm also very concerned. I'm very concerned of what the long-term impacts are of property tax authority and proposed changes there. So we want to monitor that and make sure that they're getting information from you on those topics. And really honestly, I need to know too. So, we got a lot of opportunities to have interaction with school districts over the next month. My favorite month of the year as far as being able to just hear from you guys, work on your budgets with you, see it out in admin days. But, if you have situations at your district and how those impacts are occurring, it is helpful. Some of you have emailed me that information. I have saved all that in a folder so I can go back when I have those conversations with senators, governor's office, others, that I have examples of, this is real implications going on in school districts. So that is very helpful for me to know what's going on in your district. So again, all the budget meetings and budgets I'll be reviewing over the next couple of months, helping me understand your situation is very helpful in those conversations. I thought it was worth covering year 3 of LB 583 because Michelle's first go around of calculating TEEOSA this upcoming year, it's going to have the year 3 impacts. And so I think just trying to make sure people know and are planning for the changes that are coming down the road. So just the quick recap, LB 583 during the 23 session. By now, hopefully all of you have received all of your increased special ed reimbursement. That was at 80% for this state reimbursement amount this year. That will continue on forward. Language in this bill that was passed that created that increase says that the state's going to reimburse it at 80%. So they have to do a statute change to change that. There's also maintenance and effort requirements that does not allow them to go below the dollar amount. That doesn't mean they have to stay at 80%. So they could change the statute and say, we're just going to fund it, or we're going to take the 80% out and we're just going to fund the dollar amount that we've been funding going forward. And so what you would anticipate then is over time, that will decrease the percentage, which is what happened in previously, before they increased it this last go around. So that is a possibility, but right now it says 80%. So we anticipate that that's going to stay. Foundation aid per formula student, at $1,500 was part of LB 583 too. Obviously all of you have seen that in TEEOSA, but year 3, there was a change. So in year 3, the special education increase reimbursement starts to show up in the TEEOSA formula as an accountable receipt. So if you are one of the equalized districts, that means that your equalization aid is going to go down. Your sped reimbursement stays the same, but part of the way that the legislature decided to address that issue of really no more funding going to the equalized school districts beginning in year 3 is they moved $600 of the foundation aid outside of the resource calculation. So 900 of it stays in, 600 of it moves out. What does that mean for an equalized district? That means that your equalization aid is going to go down, but you're going to receive foundation aid in the amount of $600 per student going forward, in addition to your equalization aid. The idea was that would essentially create somewhat of a break even for those equalized school districts, and they'd still be receiving benefit. If that's exact, I'm sure it's district to district to know, or actual impacts. For the non-equalized school districts, which is the majority of you right now, that doesn't impact you. So the 600 moving outside of the resource calculation, you're going to see your foundation aid show up on two lines is what's going to happen when Michelle puts that first model out in January. You're going to see your $900 per formula student show up on the line where it is right now. And then you're going to see a second line showing up after resources in that A1 TEOSA document, where it's going to have the 600 times your formula students. So you're still getting the same $1,500. There is no, I've gotten asked that question multiple times. There's no reduction to your foundation aid. It's just going to show up in two columns instead of one. So hopefully that clarifies what year 3 impacts are for that LD 583. Let me know if there's any questions on that. I'm anticipating that there may be.
Yeah.
Just real quick going through, since property tax authority is still somewhat new, I feel like it's worth reviewing. I'm going to do this at a high level and hit things that I think are most important to you now. Just high level, it is a third spending restriction for school districts. It looks like right now it is the most, it's the one that's having the biggest impact on school districts. Levy lid isn't big for hardly any school districts anymore. Spending lid budget authority is impactful to some school districts, but not to the degree property tax authority. It is easily far and away the one that is restricting school districts the most at this point. And it's really what you need to remember is it's really a revenue lid. It's looking at your increase in revenues or limiting the increase in revenues you can have as a school district. It doesn't limit your growth of property taxes. Particularly, it depends on how your revenues are changing to really impact what property tax authority does. It does allow that revenue to grow each year, 3% minimum for all districts. And then if you have membership growth, poverty growth, or LEP growth, you'll see additional growth on that 3%. Now, here's the part that I think really is important to school districts right now to understand. We certified amount to you at the end of May on what your property tax authority is. Keep in mind, that's for the general fund and the building fund. The amount that we certified to you is not the maximum amount that you can obtain for your district. You have the ability to override that amount with 70% board approval. That's the second thing on the list, additional board approved property tax authority. So with 70% board approval, you can access between 4 to 7% additional property tax authority based on your district size. So on the left side of this slide, you see, obviously, if you're at 471 or less average daily membership, you can access 7%. If you're over 10,001 students, it's 4%. Obviously, this was really the crosshairs. This piece was in the crosshairs of the political discussion last September, October, August. And really, I should say the spring session too, and what drove some of the possibility or some of the discussion of changing property tax authority, creating hard caps. You saw that, changing the amount that you can access that's unused. All those different topics were discussed during session, and that's boards accessing that additional authority is what drove that. What happens with are you seeing that on the screen? Okay, good. What happens if you access that additional authority is your board can tax between your building and your general fund for more, but is not required to. So you can access the additional authority and not tax for it. If you don't tax for it right now under current law, that amount of unused property tax authority is added on to the following year's property tax authority. If you tax for it, it's in your base and gets grown the following year. So there are impacts if your board passes that, whether you tax for it or not. it does impact future years under current legislation. That could change during a special session, that could change next year. That is just an unknown. So I think that's important for people to understand that there are significant impacts by that piece of LB 243 that was passed last year. Other options that you have, you can override the property tax authority certification amount with 60% of your district voters. So notice, for levy override or budget authority override, you only need 50%. But for property tax authority override, you need 60%. If you're going to go out and get this vote for an override, make sure that you review your district's financial situation to make sure you don't need a levy override. If you're close to, if you're at $1.03 and going up over, adding to your property tax authority is going to push you up over $1.05, you probably want to do that as well. Or if you're out of spending authority, you don't have enough additional spending authority, and you're going to go for that vote, you better get your budget authority override as well. And then for those 5 districts that had a levy override when this is passed, they grandfathered in the additional amount to their property tax authority. So we add that in for them. When all those things are added together, your total general and building fund property tax authority, that's what will show up on the LC2. So keep in mind, if you're doing the additional board vote, you have to do that prior to submitting your budget. So that's to be done prior to September 30th. You can do it anytime now till then. You have to give a week's notice in the paper before your board is going to vote on that item. You don't have to have a hearing for it, but it does have to be publicized in the paper. And I would highly recommend that you be prepared to answer the questions, not only from your district constituents, but also from state senators and others in our political parties, governor's office, because they will be watching that very closely.
Question. Is that ADM number from the 2023-24 year?
The ADM number, when we certified it, is the most recent available. And so when we certified property tax authority to you, it would have been based on the 22-23 year, because the 23-24 ADM won't be finalized until the end of July. Just real quick, one last slide on property tax authority. Well, I lied, there is one more, but I'm going to skip it. I want to go walk through an example again, because I've gotten a lot of questions, there is confusion on this. I'm using it's an example in our state of a district whose property tax authority was $333 million in 23-24, and it dropped to $291 million for 24-25. So they lost $42 million in property tax authority. So again, a lot of people thought they were going to get a 3% increase in their property tax authority every year, and that's really not what this is. That's not how this operates or functions. So why would this district have a $42 million loss in property tax authority? Well, first of all, we look at their revenue growth. We calculate their revenue growth actually allowed for 28 million more revenue for 24-25. So that's an increase to property tax authority. However, they had an increase in TEEOSA of 32 million. So that pushes that property tax authority down. They had an increase in SPED revenue change. So that's the going from 42% to 80% SPED reimbursement, dropped then another 30 million. And then the other revenue that we look at that's available to school districts in their building and general fund increased 8 million. That also pushes property tax authority down. So when you add those together, the increase in revenue growth of 28 million, $32 million increase in TEEOSA, 30 million in SPED, 8 million other revenue, that works out to a $42 million decrease in property tax authority. So property tax authority is the end piece. We back into that. We look at all the other things and determine what's left to fill that gap. That's how we determine property tax authority. I think that's just helpful to look at and understand how exactly property tax authority is working. Teresa had a slide on this, so I'm not going to cover this anymore, other than to say, along with the board vote on the additional authority. This number is what we're required to submit to legislature, and it is very public. And I know that the large newspapers in our state asked for that information last year. So be prepared to answer the questions of why you ain't put what you put on that line. Now, I think it's going to become a lot harder to distinguish what to put on that line going forward. Year one was pretty easy because you could point to the increase in foundation aid. If you're non-equalized and they don't make big changes to our formula, you're probably still looking at how much foundation aid we're getting. And I guess you're going to have to calculate what the difference is between 42% state reimbursement for you and 80%. That's probably what I would put on that line if I'm non-equalized. If I'm equalized, I'm probably just putting that difference between 42% and 80% in state sped reimbursement is what makes the most sense to me. I mean, that's really what you're decreasing your property tax ask by. And that, there's no way for them to verify those numbers, but that is legit. And you know what you need to run your districts. And I know that districts aren't just taxing to tax. They're taxing because they have a need of revenue coming in. And you have additional state revenue coming in those amounts. So that is what you're reducing your property tax authority by. Even if they cannot, even if one of the challenges is trying to get senators and others to recognize that property tax doesn't go down dollar for dollar by state increase, because there's also increases to budgets and just normal inflationary growth that school districts have, just like any other operating business or political subdivision. So the frequently asked questions: does the board approve the additional amount carry forward? Yes. And we covered that. When does the board need to approve the additional amount? Anytime. That can be done anytime between now and September 30th. I would highly recommend doing it before you're having your budget hearing and publishing your budget, because if you're putting a budget out there that includes the additional property tax authority from your board granted additional amount, and your board doesn't approve that, you're going to have to go back and change things. If you don't tax for the full amount of your property tax authority, that additional amount gets added on to your following year's property tax authority at the end of our calculation. Just real quick, LB 644. I know this will be year 3, so it's not new anymore, but some of you have kind of avoided those hearings, and so you haven't had to go through that fund. Just note there that you will be part of those hearings between September 14th and 24th. That doesn't mean you can't have your budget hearing prior to that. You can have that all taken care of. You shouldn't, I don't believe, politically pass your budget, approve your budget before you've had the joint public hearing if you're part of that. The joint public hearing does replace your tax request hearing. Some districts have still done that, just to be transparent. That is allowable. You can have an additional hearing, but you're not required to. The postcard will be sent to all of your affected property taxpayers. Highly recommend. I think last year was better, but year 1 was awful as far as mistakes on those postcards. If your county official will allow you to look at them. And if I was a county official, I don't know why I wouldn't want a school district to review it, make sure that it's correct before it goes out. I would ask that question. It may save you a lot of headaches and a lot of phone calls and emails if that goes out incorrect. Extraordinary increase special education. We had year 1 of this last December. If you really, just the real quick on this is, if you have a large increase in special education for your district, you may qualify for an early payment. It's not additional funds coming to your district. It basically just speeds up the final financial report of the state reimbursement. That any amount that you get as part of this will be reduced from your following year's reimbursement. You have to have spent more than half, or 107% of half of last year's sped expenditures from September 1 through December 31st to qualify. And then you'll submit a form and we'll pay it out by the end of January. So you're getting a 10-month sped up payment if you have cash flow issue. If you don't have a cash flow issue, I would say it's probably not worth messing with. We only had one district that that qualified and requested it this last year. One other thing to note, and I think this has been a little bit confusing for people and probably will become less of an issue with ESSER funds going away, but federal fund indirect cost rate requirement, if you take indirect cost rate, claim indirect costs on any of your grants, you have to be consistent. Federal guidelines require you to be consistent and take indirect costs on all grants, not just federal grants. I'm going to back up and correct myself. It requires you to budget indirect costs in all grants. The kind of goofy part is that's inconsistent is the federal guidelines will actually allow you to overspend on your direct uses and therefore not ultimately claim indirect costs on all of your federal grants or all of your grants if you end up overspending on the direct. But you have to budget it the same way that you budget the other ones, unless a federal grant or other grant has limits how much your indirect costs can be to a smaller amount. So some grants don't allow as much indirect cost to be claimed, then you have to use the smaller amount. But I guess the key here is you have to budget the same. At the end of the day, though, you're not required to actually spend the same. You can overspend on the direct portions of those grants. Monitoring, we are moving more and more to a system for reimbursement for grants, to a system of very little testing in the initial reimbursement request, which is good and bad. It means that we should be able to keep getting faster. We're looking at some additional changes to that process, but we should be able to get faster in our reimbursements to everybody, which is obviously good and something we're working towards. The bad is we have to come in and do fiscal monitoring to satisfy the federal requirements. Then that means at minimum, everybody has to be monitored every 3 years. We do a risk assessment. Again, this is federal requirements. If you end up being high risk, you could be monitored every year for the fiscal monitoring or every other year, depending on how that turns out. But at minimum, every 3 years.
Question here that came, I think, after the indirect cost. Are poverty amounts calculated and available from NDE? Just want to make sure we claim the right amount.
So this is the slide Michelle was covering. We are working here shortly. We'll have out the 117.65% of what your 23-24 poverty and LEP allowances were on our website soon. So watch in the next couple of weeks for sure. We'll have the new poverty and LEP amounts out on the website so you can reference that. But you can also calculate yourself just by taking what your 23-24 poverty allowance or LEP allowance was, multiplying it by 117.65%. So that's all that's done to provide that amount. The common errors we're seeing when we're out fiscal monitoring, time and effort logs continue to be the biggest struggle. Make sure that you're doing those correctly. Not going to spend a bunch of time on that. But one of the things to note there, if you're charging a person's salary to a federal grant, you have to code the same amount or same percentage of benefits to that federal grant. So if you have a para that you're charging to a Title I grant and you're charging 50% of their salary for that purpose, you need to code 50% of their benefits to that as well. That's a common thing we're seeing across the state. May need to have a policies and procedures manual, needs to be updated. Coding issues. If you claim reimbursement for something out of one of those federal grants, you can't go back and change that coding after you've been reimbursed for it. And then obviously, I think a lot of you have found that the warning we gave you with the ESSER funds about using it for construction, we're going to come with some pretty difficult federal requirements as far as data stake and wage requirements. That has been the issue as anticipated. So just if you're walking through construction stuff with those funds, make sure you're aware of that and working through those issues. And then federal procurement requirements are also challenging at times for some districts. Census collection, just to make sure everybody has some fun the week of July 4th next week. That collection opens July 1st. It's due July 10th. You have an audit window from July 11th through 20th to correct anything that's incorrect there. But that information is important for the apportionment payments that we pay out in February. it is used for a few other things, but that's the big part of what that's used for. Title allocations, we just got from the federal government yesterday what those amounts are for the state. And so we are working through all our calculations and work to get that available and released to districts as soon as possible. Mid-July is the target there. We want to have that available before new soup orientation for those that are new soups, business managers, bookkeepers, whatever, that have come out, are going to come out or have come out. We started something new last year, having the ESCA team, federal programs team, come out to new soup orientation and assist with this title allocation or the consolidated application, I guess is the terminology we use. So they will be there. New soup orientation will also be at admin days, assisting districts with this. I know they're also meeting other having ESU superintendent meetings in July and August. So that'll be available and they'll be available to help you with that. When you come out there, their recommendation, bring your data, salary and benefit amounts of staff being paid with those federal funds, and they'll help you walk through the grant. I think that'll be helpful. Just make sure this is a coding issue. Just make sure that you're coding the amounts to those federal grants that you're using. Don't overcode the federal grants. You're losing potentially on state reimbursement by doing that through the TEEOSA calculation. Possibly state reimbursement through, if it's SPED, IDEA funds, you might be losing out there if you're overcoding too. All paraprofessionals working in a Title I school-wide building must be qualified prior to working with students, and they must have one of the following to be qualified. They have a high school diploma or GED, compilation of 2 years of college, demonstrate competency through an approved or local assessment. And then again, time and effort must be done every year to claim reimbursement for them. The templates are available on our website. And if you have questions, use the contact us link on the GMS landing page, and we will make sure that we get back to you on any other questions there. I wanted to hit the federal fund. Again, we're getting down to the wire on the ESSER funds. 1 and 2 are done. September 30th is the deadline for ESSER 3 to be obligated. There is no exception to that. All ESSER 3 funds must be obligated by September 30th. That doesn't necessarily mean they have to be spent by then. They need to be spent and requested reimbursement by end of November. There is possible extensions available through the federal government. It's on a case-by-case basis. It's not guaranteed. If you're in a situation where you have to do that, although I highly, highly recommend avoiding that at all costs, you would make that known to us. We have to request the reimbursement on your behalf. We need to do that sooner as opposed to later if that's the case, that your situation that you're in, because if that, we don't know, we have no timeline, no guidelines from the feds on when they'll grant that extension. But if they don't grant it and it's after September 30th, you won't have obligated those funds and you have no chance you've lost. That's one of the concerns. Or if something goes through and they don't allow something, or something turns out incorrect, or a vendor that you were planning to use, you've gotten a bid and you have that bid from the vendor, so it's obligated, and then that vendor goes out of business or says, nope, we can't do this, or the part's unavailable, those funds are no longer obligated by that September 30th deadline. You would have to do something different. You can't be obligated. A lot of concerns with going past September 30th. So really, really helpful if you can get those reimbursement requests in ASAP, get them spent ASAP. If you're struggling to know how to do that, call myself, call the ESCA team, Dottie, Beth, any of them on that team are really good. They know what other districts have used it for. We really want to get people to get the reimbursement requests in as soon as possible, so we're not up against that deadline. Just a quick note here, the exempt school system, Probably everybody's aware that that was less than ideal last year, in a lot of ways. It is online. It is working and functioning as intended this year. It opened on June 3rd. We already have, I think almost a third of the filers are submitted. What that means for school districts is come August, we will have the report available for you to log in and check and see who in your district has filed for exempt status. It is important. We had a lot of school districts that missed that where the old report in the old system was is not in use anymore. So if you never saw the 24 or 23, 24 filers, you were looking at the old system. There is a new collection, a new system, a new place you go to review your filers for 23, 24 and forward. So that'll be available in August. I'm not concerned. Then I guess this could be my words I regret saying, but no concerns with that report being available in August this year. I know last year that was not the case and caused issues for school districts. Opportunities for budget assistance. So we talked a lot about budget assistance this morning. I guess the biggest takeaway from all this, and I hope people always feel we are available. We're your support system in this, especially for your new soups and business managers. But we're here if it's just, even if you are a longtime expert in budgeting, it's always good to get a second set of eyes on it. We can do that for you. That's what we're here for. For anybody that's new or just wants a refresh on budgeting, school finance type stuff, our new soup orientation this year is out in North Platte. Now it is in the location. So if you're one that's been there in the past, we will be out at the ESU 16 building in North Platte. The morning portion of new soup orientation is really kind of classroom style. The afternoon is your opportunity to just work with us. We'll be around, walking around, answering questions on TEEOSA, answering questions on budgeting, going through your budget. And then the ESEA programs team is there helping you with your title application. So even if you don't want to come to the morning part, but you're a super business manager and you want help in the afternoon with your budget or your title application, stop in if you're close by. Or you just want a reason to get out of your school building. So then we're in our new building here for the first time for that on July 18th. So that's Thursday. And that'll be down in the state boardroom on the first floor. Again, same setup there. We will provide a Zoom link for the July 18th one. Highly recommend if you can make it in person, do that. I think the interaction has been valuable in the past. And there's a lot better chance you'll get more aid if you come and laugh at my poor jokes and I can see that you're laughing. So anyways, kissing up always helps. And then administrator days, as we have in the past, we will be available up on the second floor from 8 till 4 on Wednesday of NDE day. And then sometimes if there's not a lot going on, we're out of there around 3 on Thursday, but we'll be in there at 8 or earlier. That's a first come, first serve up there, but we are glad to help out, work on your budget. I would tell you both for new soup and administrator days, if you're new, if you can come and at least have the first column filled out, working off of your AFR or your audit and get those numbers in, that's a good place to start. If that doesn't make sense to you, then come and we'll help walk you through that and we'll give you homework, send you home, and we'll see you the next time, either at administrator days or we'll set up a meeting with you. But we're available there. So come see us. We do take bribes in the form of food if you want to move up on the list. We're not above that. And then just anytime, email us. I look at a lot of budgets, people just email them to me. I'll look at them and I'll send you back a list of all the concerns or issues or things to think about. And we can work through those that way or do a phone call after we've seen it. That's helpful. We're available by Zoom meeting. Sometimes, just walking through and showing you what we're looking at is helpful to you. Or we'll meet with you too. Come on into the office, set up a meeting for that. So just make sure that you have just make sure you know that, we're here to help you. Our contact information there, Michelle, Stephanie, Teresa, all really good resources for you. We're glad to help. That's what we have for you today. I appreciate everybody joining and staying awake. At least the issue one did, since we can see them.
Got one question for you.
Oh, we got it. And I was gonna say, we'll answer some questions now. So we have a question.
Okay, this was earlier, for the new option enrollment collection, if a student fills out the application during the 23-24 school year to attend our district for 24-25, and they are denied, do we put that report for this collection?
Yes. So the answer is, if you denied for the collection opening July 1st, that will be for enrollment options that you denied June 1st of 23 through May 31st of 24. So this last school year, that's what we're collecting now. Again, that collection opens July 1st. And next year it'll be part of, our goal is to open it like May 15th when all the other collection, May 1st when all the other spring collections open. But yep, that will open then. Any other questions? Okay, well, we'll stay on for a couple minutes here to see if there's any other questions. Hope everybody gets a nice break over the next few weeks and refreshes and gets ready for the next school year. Thank you all.